Hi everyone, hope you're all well. Now, as mentioned in the last episode, I'm going to be looking at the bodywork of the Evora and its construction, material and replacement costs. But first, I'm going to start by having a look at why Lotus chose fiberglass as a material rather than metal, and a little history of fiberglass or composites. I'd just like to say, I'm no expert on composites, so this is just my take on it. Now, modern fiberglass as we know it was discovered accidentally by an American guy called Darrell Kleist whilst working for Corning Glass. Corning Glass joined the Owens, Illinois in 1935, and in 1936 they patented the product Fiberglass with one S. DuPont then patented polyester resin to combine with the fiberglass, and the first composites were made. Now, the Germans furthered the research more during the Second World War. British intelligence agents then managed to steal the secrets of the resin and research from the Germans and handed them over to the Americans. Bit of James Bond there. Of course, wartime always accelerates ideas that may help the war effort, and fiberglass components started appearing on Allied aircraft. Mainly used at first as a cover for early airborne radar on night fighters, such as the Bristol Beaufighter, and later on the de Havilland Mosquito, and the first American aircraft to use an airborne radar, the P-61 Black Widow. Fiberglass was ideal as the radio waves could go straight through it, unlike metal. Of course, composites have progressed a lot since then, particularly in the aircraft industry. If you've been on a flight in a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, most of that aircraft is made of composite materials. Colin Chapman realised early on that fiberglass would be a good material to produce cars with, but not before some other people had already realised this. In 1949 in America, a guy called Bill Tripp manufactured a car called the Glasspar G2, a bit of a kit car, and about 150 bodies were made, and one of them is enshrined in the Smithsonian Institute as the first production fiberglass car. Then in 1953, Chevrolet introduced the Corvette C1 with a fiberglass body, and up until 1962 they made over 69,000 of those cars. The Corvette went through many evolutions and is now the C8, a competitor for the new Lotus Emira. Now, here's one I recently discovered and produced in 1956, the Volvo P1900. Not exactly a huge success, and only produced up until 1957, where 67 were made. In 1957, Lotus joined in with a fiberglass car, the Type 14 Lotus Elite, one of the first fiberglass monocoque cars made, but the bodies were not made by Lotus, but initially by a company called Maximar Mouldings in Sussex, and the majority by the Bristol Aeroplane Company. Yep, the same company that built the Beaufighter previously mentioned, and later a car maker in their own rights. I think the Elite is one of the prettiest cars ever built, and at the time stood out from all other cars with its styling and innovation. Very much before my time at Lotus, and I have only ever driven one of these at Hethel of the 1,000 that were built. But if I want to know anything about them, then I'll just ask a friend of mine called Miles Wilkins, who was one of the longest serving Lotus dealers in the world. He just about knows everything about them, and he is also an expert source for the Lotus twin cam engine and fiberglass and paintwork repair, of which he has written books about. In fact, I reckon Miles has forgotten more than I'll ever know about Lotus cars. A top bloke and a real character. Another fiberglass car of the time was the SP250 Daimler Dart, a little two-seater convertible with a 2.5 litre V8 engine, built from 59 to 64 with a production run of just over 2,500 cars. Now, while most of those companies fell by the wayside, as did fiberglass as a material for cars, Lotus persisted with that material, as did Corvette. So, what is the advantage of using fiberglass? Steel press panels are expensive to make and initially need to be produced in high numbers to recover the tooling costs. Once they're set up, they just keep banging them out. Fiberglass is good for low volume manufacture, and shapes can be changed more easily. There are several different types of processes for making fiberglass panels, and one is the open mould process. This involves making a mould, a task then undertaken by the engineering toolroom at Lotus. These moulds were installed in a laminating shop at Lotus, and the guys would first wax the mould, then apply a gel coat. The fiberglass mat is then put into place, laying the mat in different directions of weave and impregnated with resin and a catalyst, and rolled and tamped into the mould to get rid of the air bubbles. Lotus also pioneered the vacuum assisted resin injection or vary process for the X180 Esprit bodies, which were made in two halves. So if you thought the raised waistline was a styling feature on the Esprit, it's not. It's where the top and bottom of the cars were bonded together. This used a male and female mould with a vacuum applied to pull in the resin, and it cures at room temperature. The panels are then popped out of the mould and fettled and bonded together, then prepped and go to the paint shop. Sadly, the toolroom and laminating shop as it was no longer exists at Lotus. Now, with the introduction of the Series 2 release, it was decided to outsource the panel manufacture to a company in France called Satira. These composites were also adopted for the Evora production. Okay, so let's have a look at which panels are made from which different types of composite. I've also put the approximate price for some of these panels if you did need to buy them, and these would be for an unpainted assembly from Lotus. They aren't cheap, that's for sure, especially the carbon fibre ones. I've also quoted the Lotus labour time to remove and refit or replace, and this does not include painting. Now, one type of composite is called Injection Compression System Resin Transfer Moulding, or ICSRTM for short. That's not very short, is it? This is for external panels where quality is a priority and are produced using this process. Glass fibre mat is cut to shape and pre-formed when necessary, laid in a heated chrome steel surfaced closed mould in which polyester resin is injected. After filling the gap between the two halves of the mould, it is then squeezed in order to compress the moulding. Panel thickness can be varied according to the strength or weight requirement of that particular panel. The special low profile resin used during the curing process provides a smooth surface finish. Now, the panels used in this process include the front clamshell outer, which is made up of the outer and several reinforcement panels bonded in by the Lotus body bonding area using Plexus 2-part methacrylate and Bettermate 2810 structural adhesives. Lotus labour time for remove and refit is 2.2 hours, which you will be doing to access all the components hidden underneath it, such as the radiator and the fans. The clamshell is fixed with various bolts, nuts, washers and adjusting shims, and Lotus have cunningly hidden one fixing nut underneath the nose badge. Possibly the most difficult job is realigning the headlamp assemblies to make it fit nice and flush. If the clam is damaged beyond repair, and these panels are not easily repaired if the damage is bigger than your fist, you'll need a new one. Currently, a new front clamshell is around £4,000. Now, moving on to the rear clamshell, the outer. The rear clamshell, like the front, is made up of the outer and several reinforcement panels bonded in by the Lotus body bonding area using the same adhesives as the front. The Lotus labour time for remove and refit is 4 hours, which you will be doing to remove powertrain, to do a clutch replacement, etc. Clamshell is fixed with various bolts, nuts, washers and adjusting shims, and Lotus have also hidden two fixings inside the car behind the rear quarter trim panels. Thank you, Lotus. Currently, a new rear clam is around £4,000. Now, moving on to the body sides, which are a big panel bonded onto the tub and one which you don't want to have to change. The Lotus labour time for replacement is 35 hours. It's a big messy job which involves cutting out the windscreen, cutting off the roof, cutting around the rear bulkhead. It's not nice. Currently, a new body side is around £1,800. Now, the tailgate inner comes as part of the tailgate assembly, bonded together in the Lotus body bonding area to the outer panel. Moving to the top, to the roof panel. The roof is a single skin panel manufactured from composite mentioned or carbon fibre. This is bonded to the body sides, windscreen frame and to the rear bulkhead. Lotus labour time to replace is 13.5 hours. A standard composite panel will cost you around £1,050 and the carbon fibre version is £3,000. The door inner comes as part of the door assembly, bonded together in the Lotus body bonding area again to the outer panel. The windscreen frame is a large hollow structure filled with foam to give it strength, bonded onto the tub, and once windscreen and roof panel is bonded on, it is very strong and will take the weight of the car if it is inverted. I've seen it and it does. To replace it, the time quoted is 30 hours and the frame will cost about £1,500. So that's the panels made using injection compression system resin transfer moulding process. We'll move on now to panels made using resin transfer moulding process, much easier to say. This uses a liquid thermoset resin to saturate a fibre preform placed in a closed mould. The panels used in this process are as follows: the battery and boot box and clamshell reinforcement panels, which are all part of the rear clamshell assembly. Now the rear bulkhead, which is buried inside the car to separate the interior from the engine bay. It's insulated to stop heat and noise entering the interior. Also, the rear cabin window that's fitted is double glazed and the void filled with argon gas to help with this. But if you have a Sport 410, it will have a single layer glass, and the GT 430 will have a single layer polycarbonate one. If you did need to buy a bulkhead panel, it would cost around £700, and the quoted labour time is time taken, which means as long as it takes, which is a long time. Okay, so let's have a look at the panels now made using sheet moulded composite or SMC. So what is SMC? To explain simply, a plastic film is laid on a moving bed, a polyester resin is layered onto this film, and strands of chopped fiberglass about an inch long is distributed over the resin. Then another layer of plastic is applied and compacted. This is then fed onto a large roller for storage and it's still soft. The moulds are made of steel and have male and female elements. Of course, these are very expensive to produce. That's why the model updates on the Elise season Evora, where they changed bumpers or clamshells, went back to a hand-laid fiberglass. Lotus couldn't afford to retool for SMC. So the charges, as they are called, are cut from the rolls and laid into the moulds, which are then heated and pulled together at a low pressure. Once cured, they are pulled from the mould and do not require as much rectification work as open mould panels do. The finish is also of a higher quality, being smooth on both sides of the panel and a consistent thickness. We'll start with the tailgate outer, which is of course bonded to the tailgate inner previously mentioned. Tailgates will either be fitted with a heated tempered glass screen or a carbon fibre louvre tailgate with no glass. The rear wing or aerofoil is attached to the tailgate assembly. The standard SMC tailgate will cost you around £1,400 and a louvred carbon fibre one will cost you around £3,500. Now to the door outer panels, which are of course bonded to the door inner panels as previously mentioned. If you order a door assembly from Lotus, it would come supplied with the extruded alloy beam bonded into it. This is fitted to protect the occupants from a side intrusion in the event of an accident. Very useful. A fabricated steel beam mounting is also bonded to the inside of the door shell front face, which also provides mountings for the door hinges, which incidentally are from a 1998 Ford Focus. If you have to renew a door, the Lotus labour time is 2.5 hours, and as with all panel times quoted, does not include painting. This is an extra time, and Lotus do not quote paint times anymore. The A-post panels and front access hatch are also manufactured from SMC, but there are also carbon fibre alternatives. An SMC A-post panel would cost you around £400 and the carbon fibre version £795. An SMC front access hatch would cost you around £460 and the carbon fibre version £1,050. And lastly, the front and rear bumpers, which are produced by a reinforced reaction injection moulding, or RIM for short. Here a mixture of polyurethane resin and milled glass is injected into a closed mould to result in panels with a good surface finish and high flexibility. You can recognise these by their flexible quality when you press them. Many cars use this material for bumpers as it is forgiving of small impacts. Now the 400 series and GT cars can be hand-laid fiberglass or carbon fibre depending on the models. Tap on these and they're very hard. Lotus labour time for remove and refit is for the front bumper 1.8 hours and the rear is 1 hour. Good luck with that. A standard one, front or rear, will cost around £1,000 and a carbon fibre one around £3,500. So now you have a rough idea of what the body is made of, how long it should take you to repair it and how much it will cost for the parts. So if you've never taken a Lotus apart before, what should you expect? Well, I spent many years doing this. Expect fixings to be seized and break off, and I'm not talking about a 10-year-old car either. Some of the fixings used on a Lotus could have been a better quality and not aged so prematurely. Don't always expect new panels to fit perfectly first time. They sometimes need a little love and fettling to make them fit properly. Where panels join together, such as the front clam to A panels, expect various different thickness shims that will fall out and scatter on the floor when you unbolt them, if you're not careful. Expect to find a multitude of different size fixings and washers. After all that, you will appreciate why Lotus cars are hand built and not mass produced cars. Mass production means using robots to build in large quantities. Up until now, a robot that could bolt a Lotus together only exists in science fiction films. Current robots like things that fit together perfectly, first time, every time, and that in my experience is not a Lotus. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the Lotus cars are poorly built, far from it. They are well built, but only humans can adapt to these inconsistencies. And this is one of the things that made a Lotus special. Each car was slightly different in some way. But as it stands, they are a long way off of mass producing the current cars, and I do include the Evora in that. And will the Evora be the last hand-built car from Lotus? We'll see. I've no doubt the new factory in China will mass produce the Lotus SUV and future models, but I fear they will be a Lotus in name only. So this concludes my look at the Evora, a very underrated sports car from Lotus. A reliable, strong powertrain, somewhat compromised by the gearbox, a strong, very stiff chassis that enable Lotus to make the suspension work like nobody else can, and dynamically a fantastic car to drive on the road and on the track. In my opinion, it suffered from a lack of decent marketing and also what I think was a wrong decision just to offer the more expensive launch edition at the beginning, and in the end it became just too expensive for what it really was. A nearly new Evora GT 410 is around £90,000, and the new first edition Evora with lots of bells and whistles will be £76,000. Of course, the Evora is priced to compete with a certain German car. But the Evora will be remembered as one of the best Lotus cars made. As Lotus enters a new era and the first Evoras roll out of the much improved manufacturing facility early next year, the new era cars need to be of a better build quality and value than seen recently. From what I've seen so far, this is being achieved, but no customer production cars have been built yet. They also need to expand and improve the dealer network hugely to support the proposed volumes, because who will buy a car whose nearest dealer is miles away, sometimes hundreds? I sincerely also hope that in all the work that Lotus are doing to elevate the brand upwards, that Lotus do not forget the enthusiasts and dealers that have loyally supported the marque through some very difficult times. Lotus could really do with an in-house heritage section to support all the cars made before the era and not just forget them as often happened when they went out of production. Let's face it, Lotus are always banging on about their heritage, so how about they put their money where their mouth is and actually do something to actively support it. Lotus can open all its new shiny dealers that fits with the new corporate image to sell and maintain the new cars. But how about some smaller, more shall we say boutique authorised repairers to look after the owners of the older cars? Now, this is just my opinion, but I do know I'm not alone in this thinking. Righto, I've waffled on enough now. For the future, I'm just starting to work on features about Danny Bahar era and the cars, and also an interview with my mate and Lotus aficionado Richard Paramin, which I know will be a laugh and it'll also be interesting. So until the next time, take care, enjoy life and your Lotus if you got one, and so long.